And we're live. Okay, so this is for those of you who don't know, the second stream I've had with Graham Smith. The first one was discussing Kokesh, but I wanted to make sure that the only interview on this channel with Graham Smith wasn't just talking about somebody else, because Graham does valuable things on his own, and I think there should be an interview here just to discuss the valuable things that he does. So, I'm tagging a bunch of people on Facebook. Let me know if there's any issues with the connection, because the state has been messing with my connection a few times while we've been on. So feel free to share this once I post this. There's plenty to go around. All that being said, I wanted to talk specifically about various things related to Japan and also related to what made him move and made him decide that the U.S. Wasn't the home for liberty that he wanted. So with all that in mind, I want to get this out fucking on Twitter. That is, if I can get it out on Twitter. It's giving me an error message. And I want to get this out because I want people to go to his sites. I want people to explore what he does. And all that being said, this is brought to you by Liberty Under Attack Publications. Looking for a Liberty-focused publisher? Liberty Under Attack Publications assists authors through the entire publishing process. Proofreading, editing, cover designs, paperbacking, Kindle formatting, and full audiobook narration and post-production. Tell them Jeremiah sent you and take 20% off a full-service deal. They also publish books and strategy guides for individuals looking to increase their personal freedom, great anarchist fiction like Agora, and guides like Shane Radliff's Vanu, a strategy for self-liberation. To publish your next book or find your next read, please visit libertyunderattack.com. Share your story, find your freedom. With all that being said, it's also brought to you by Liberty Professionals. Liberty Professionals will help you secure your home, small business, and life. It's run by a residential security expert who's an ASIS board certified physical security professional. And if you need work done in the Virginia area, they do missing persons investigations, skip tracing, and more. Contact them for more info. He has all the necessary tools in his toolbox to bring you peace of mind and stability for the future. Support Liberty businesses and these streams by heading over to libertyprofessionals.com to get your consult today. And on that score, libertyunderattack.com has a sale going on right now on editing and proofreading. So if you want to get in on that before the sale is over and get your book, your whatever, edited and proofread, feel free to hit them up for 20% off that, or just get 20% off the full service deal by telling them I sent you. All that being said, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Graham? Because I think we talked a little bit too much about somebody else last time.
No, that's totally okay, man. It's good to spread the word on that other issue as well. Yeah, I'm just a dude originally from Northwest Indiana, about an hour south of Chicago. I moved to Japan in 2010, and shortly thereafter, I became an anarchist, a full-on anarchist in Japan. And actually, Japan was one of the things that kind of helped lead me to that, just being away from my old environment and all the kind of influences there. And so it inspired me to start this thing called Voluntary Japan and try to spread not only the culture of individualism, more so here in a largely collective society, collectivist kind of culture, but also to share some ideas about Japan with friends and people in America and libertarians especially. People tend to think it's all just groupthink, robotic kind of stuff here sometimes, but there's actually a lot of stuff I found that was very libertarian. So I started this website, and it's really loosely organized. There's a couple people in Japan I'm connected with. There's no order to anything really. I like to drink alcoholic beverages and speak my mind, but over the years we've kind of grown in our small fan base, and one of the main things we promote is unschooling, which is totally doable here in Japan, and in many ways easier than in the States, I think. And that's just pretty much it. That's voluntary Japan, I guess, in a loose, big nutshell. There, I don't
Okay,
know if I can say
so
loose nutshell.
what influences are you talking about that make that it's sort of hard to get rid of by living in the States?
Well, in my case, it was just I don't know, just well, number one is like, okay, they say that what is it, Amerocentrism or whatever, which is usually a bullshit kind of SJW-ish type thing. I thought I was pretty independent and open-minded and cultured, but when I came to Japan, I realized that wow, I really did have it in me that like, oh, America was where it's at. It's the only place where it's at. It's the center of the world. And I was a libertarian, so that was the beginning to start to see things as more separate and more independent. And I don't know, I guess just you're not as exposed to the day-to-day politics. For one, when I can't understand a lot of what's going on in politics here. And another big factor was just that there's very little religion here, as is exercised in the Americas. And I was raised in a very religious household, so everything kind of broke free at once for me, where I came out of like religious dogma, and I came out of statism via finally going from Ron Paul to watching videos by people like Stefan Molyneux and Larkin Rose. Stefan, God bless him, may he philosophically rest in peace. But his video about taxation being theft, I couldn't argue with it logically. And
Hmm.
so being away from everyone that might have tried to talk me out of that and just thinking for myself, I think had a lot to do with it. But it's kind of hard to explain. But just you can't always change things by changing your geography. But I found that sometimes you kind of can too. You can kind of be your own person when you don't have the normal people surrounding you and what they expect you to be and what they expect of you and what they expect you to think, and you kind of just hit the reset button, and that's kind of what I was looking for. So
Well,
I don't know if that makes sense.
it's funny you should bring up the Americocentrism part because, well, I've stopped a long time ago giving it fuck what people like, whether or not they think I'm an SJW, proverbially speaking. I'm willing to actively work with SJWs if they're like working toward an anarchist goal. And
Yeah.
a lot of people seem to have a problem with like the anti-American sentiment, even if they claim to be anarchists in the sort of left libertarian sphere. But I think it's a very healthy thing because America has risen to global superpower status and is arguably the leader of the entire world. And when you establish that sort of headpiece of the global hegemony, I think it's very valuable to point out that any sort of philosophy that centers around America is liable to get you hurt if you're not on America's side. So, like for instance, you seemed critical recently of the Libertarian Party and their take on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I think we touched on that briefly when you were on before, but why don't you tell us a little bit about that particular issue?
Well, I mean, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and not to mention another one that a lot of people don't talk about, which is the firebombing of Tokyo, which I think was actually almost as deadly, even though it was a prolonged campaign, or maybe more deadly. I don't remember, but yeah, I was amazed to see the LP uh, post something. Of course, they always use we.
Right?
Remember what they said, but we will retaliate. It was really like nationalistic kind of stuff. And even if you're really pro-America, um, just historically, to read about those events, it's not so cut and dried. And most importantly, no innocent person ever deserves to get blown to bits because of what a couple power hungry people in suits want to do, or what sort of political dominance they want to assert. So I was blown away that the LP posted that, although I fucking hate the LP. So,
Yeah.
for, full disclosure. But I'm also amazed that even when I posted stuff like that on the Voluntary Japan Facebook page, I'd get a lot of arguments. And it was religious arguments, essentially. It was emotional, knee-jerk stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
I understand it because being here in Japan, when someone says something bad about the US, I still have this gut reaction like, hey, that's my country. You know what I mean? And, you just got to be aware of that. But I was surprised how many people were arguing. And even when I presented not my, hot take, emotional take on the matter, I presented the facts about the overtures for surrender, the attempted communications, quotes from, I forget who, was it Eisenhower, about and military brass about how it was not necessary and how Japan was already decimated, and people were still reacting like, "Holy shit!" Like, no, we had to do this because we'd be speaking Japanese or German or whatever.
Yeah, well, and it's funny that you bring that up because another libertarian, Doug Stanhope, said, "I think we didn't do anything but get drunk and watch sports bloopers. I think we should shut the fuck up." I love
One of
that
my
fucking routine.
favorite one of my favorite Stanhope bits. I've watched it multiple times. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember any incoming calls from the French.
Saying that they needed support on a project.
Yeah,
I
they needed
remember
help
us
on a
Garrett and
project.
Krauts in the trenches at Verdun.
It's a great
Fucking
bit.
great. Um, okay,
Yeah,
well,
I mean, it's interesting, and what's really interesting, for those who may be butthurt about me criticizing the U.S., is even people in Japan, I discovered, like, statism is one hell of a drug. I had a student, an adult male, and we were talking about war, and I said, yeah, it was really terrible what happened. And he said at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and he said with a straight face, 100% serious, yeah, but America had to do it. I was like, okay, well, I wonder if you're going to be that calm and collected if they have to do it again. You know what I mean? But
well, and
it's it's a
it's funny
historic.
because like a lot of people see things zoomed out, and from that fucking zoomed out perspective, where they're not on the ground, where they're not close to it, where they don't have to think about the minutia and the details, they get this mentality that things that they would never co-sign if they had to watch it are fine and okay. And I am strongly opposed to that mentality. So the way I've convinced a significant amount of people that nuclear bombings of civilian populaces aren't acceptable and that they're barely acceptable even if you know that the primary targets are going to be military is I tell them that it's boiling people alive and then burning what's left. And that after that it downwinds and gives people poisoning and sickness and birth defects, and you're essentially condemning entire generations of people because of the actions of like a select few that are typically like the only time nukes have ever been used on a civilian populace to anybody's knowledge are that particular incident, and so many people decided that it wasn't acceptable, that it wasn't good. Japan basically became a scapegoat for the imperialism of the world. And they haven't done it yet since, but you also end up with all these people saying, well, yeah, but we've got nukes anyway, and if anybody fucks with us, we'll drop them. So basically, they're threatening to boil and burn people alive. And so I tell people this, and a lot of the people who normally would side with the US suddenly realize, oh shit, what I'm supporting is like, to call it barbaric would be a compliment.
Right, right. There's a there's an anime called Barefoot Gen. I don't know if you're familiar with that,
I am
but
not.
it's if you YouTube Barefoot Gen, Gen. It's from 1983, and there's one scene where it really graphically depicts, in animated fashion but highly disturbing fashion, the moment that the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. So I usually post that to Voluntary Japan because you're right, people tend to zoom out and get in that we mindset. But we're not talking about like exterminating cockroaches here. These are people with lives and families, and the if the tables were turned, it would be a whole nother whole nother ball game. And that's another thing when I came to Japan that my eyes were open to, and I was surprised because I fancied myself as this, really open-minded libertarian type guy. But it's easy to think of people in other countries as kind of NPCs, non-player characters, not real humans.
Jingoism.
And yeah, and I don't know. It's not even just bad people or racist people that think that way. It's just like a default setting because our brains can't process a huge amount of information. Like,
Well,
you
they
know,
can, but there's an in-group
they can't.
out-group
But
preference
thinking
for
about
like shortcut purposes.
but even thinking about like we go through most of our days thinking about our shit and ourselves, and just those rare moments when you're like, holy shit, that person across from me is a whole nother person and I'm not that important to them, and I'm a character in their narrative. That type of realization really started to hit me more like, wow, this Japan's going on every day. People going to work, people doing this. Sounds silly. I knew it was true, but to be there in it and then to think about stuff, bombs like that falling and people trying to justify it, it's almost ridiculous and almost blackly funny if it wasn't so tragic. But yeah, beyond that, people should look up the fire bombings of Tokyo, and I think there was one more city. I don't remember if it was Nagoya, but those were, just horrible as well,
Hmm.
and
Well,
just
okay, so
massacred.
let's talk about something then. One of the things that I've seen you post recently is running stuff. And I wanted to talk about that partially because I want to talk about like fitness in general on my channel. I think people aren't fit enough. I think they don't train enough, and I think they're gonna die if the government cracks down. So I'm glad that you're actually working on yourself. Um, but like
Yeah,
I
my
wanted to
strength is
get
gonna be
that
running
kind of
through the hills.
information about why you're doing that in general, and then I wanted to ask you a question about it. So, why are you starting to run more, and what do you think? What do you hope to accomplish by it?
Well, I started to run about 3 years ago, and before that, I kind of hated running. I I did some running in middle school, and I sucked at it, and I was never really that great cross country. But I was working at a bar on the weekends, and I was very unhealthy, just smoking and drinking. It was a lot of fun, but I don't know. I was walking to that bar, and I saw a sign on the street that was for the Niigata, the city where I live, 2017 marathon, and it just popped into my head like I'm gonna do that. And I don't care if anyone believes me, I'm gonna do that. That's a fun goal because I like to have shit to work fucking towards, Otherwise, I kind of get depressed. So it was tough, but I trained for that and started learning, and I ran that race. And at the end, towards the end, my legs just stopped, and I was really angry because I wanted to run the whole way, but my muscles just literally seized up.
Yeah, you
Uh,
probably ran out of electrolytes or
yep,
sugars.
yep. I didn't train properly. I didn't fuel up properly, but I was able to, walk it off and then run, and then finally run across the finish. And I just felt great, like I had completed a full marathon, and I was doing it with Steam It. I was keeping a blog with Steam It, and also reading a book called What I Talk About When I Talk About Running, by Japanese novelist Haruki Murakami. And he combines running with music, with philosophy, and it's more like this spiritual journey. And for me, that's exactly kind of what it was I wasn't competing with anyone this time like in middle school cross country. I was just running.
You were
And I
competing
felt
with
like
yourself.
yeah, and the thoughts that come and being outside, like I don't like being in a gym or anything, but running through the streets, running through the mountains, I just felt very fucking peaceful, and a kind of peace that I hadn't really had before. And I tend to depression and kind of, swinging back and forth. And so I found that running just gave me a greater kind of balance, and I just started doing it. And then since then, I've run two more marathons, and I decided that part of Voluntary Japan should be encouraging this, whatever it is. If you walk long distance, if I don't know, if you do yo-yo, whatever you do, just do it for peace. And it might sound silly, like the John Lennon "bed in for peace." I know people make fun of that, but actually, instead of just only getting pissed off online, go outside and reconnect with yourself, and then you'll be better equipped for the journey mentally. And also, like you said, like prepping for the boogaloo, or I'm right by the hills here. I can practice run into the hills. Just being, in all seriousness, being in good shape makes you more prepared for things you might have to deal with. Whether that's some bad actor or unpleasant entity or some medical emergency, or the state moving in and trying to capture you, which ostensibly could be happening sooner than most people imagine. So that's why I started doing it. So I started doing this hashtag running for peace, and promoting various cryptocurrency blogging activities around that. There's a crypto platform called Scorum, and it's all about sports, and you can make crypto. It's not I'm not active there anymore, but I found a whole community surrounding that, and just a whole new part of me I didn't know existed with running, and I didn't know I could do it. And after I ran my first unbroken 20 miles and and was in tears from this kind of existential and muscular pain, where I just wanted to die and like cry for my mommy. I don't know, something happened, man, after that, where I was like, shit, man, people can do a lot. Like, I ran this far and I'm not a fucking runner. So I was just impressed by, I think, what people can really do. And that's a long-winded answer, but that's kind of how it all started.
Well, this channel is built for long-winded answers, so that's actually totally fine. What I wanted to ask is, one of the reasons I hear people say they wouldn't want to live in Japan is because of the radiation still leaking from Fukushima. So you're working on your health, but like, how much of a concern is the general environment?
Oh, dude, that shit just makes you stronger. No, I don't know. I'm actually right next to Fukushima, but next to it on the Sea of Japan side, so not really right next to it, but across the mountain range. Luckily, the weather patterns usually blow everything the other way, and the radiation tests that I've seen here for Niigata are perfectly safe. I honestly don't know what I think about that. In this country, it's impossible to get honest news about that.
Mm-hmm.
What I see coming from the West a lot is like really like hypey, sensationalized shit. My personal take is it's probably worse than most people think, but I don't think that the fear mongering type stuff, like the doctored graphics, which are actually temperature graphics, like the bright orange leaking into the ocean. I've seen those on Facebook, and that doesn't help either. So I don't know about the radiation, to be quite honest. I thought about leaving after the earthquake, but it just didn't feel right. And this is kind of my home, so until I have other information, I guess I'm gonna stay here. That's all I know. The media here is totally is it's bad. It's like
It's a
they're not gonna report.
stonewall.
Yeah, there was actually one guy, to give you an idea of how intense these people are and how the collectivism will inspire people to go down for the team. One guy, I think he was I don't know if he was a TEPCO representative or a reporter. He went into the what's it called, the no whatever zone, and to prove to people that it was safe, he took off it. He didn't wear a hazmat suit or a radiation suit, and he died. He got cancer and died like soon after that. But he wanted to go on TV and show people, hey, it's safe. So that's how extreme the media censorship is here. So to be honest, I don't know. I'm not really worried about it. I think my city's safe. There's a million things I could die from. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. I don't think I need to leave personally. Other people left, and I understand that, and that's their thing.
Well, okay, so and you seem relatively healthy, and one of the things I wanted to talk about in terms of cultural differences, because I still, even though I'm blessed slash cursed with an extremely fast metabolism, and I really don't have to worry about this. I wanted to, since I'm still stuck in like fat ass America, I wanted to ask you, culturally speaking, what's the difference between America's food and Japanese food?
In general, it's just a lot less sweet and fatty and salty. But in 10 years, I've seen that already start to change a little bit. But I mean, there's a lot more fish. People eat seaweed and veggies every day, almost every day. Especially the city I'm in, Niigata, is like probably one of the top three, maybe the top most famous city for fresh seafood. So people just are generally more active here. I've been amazed by seeing some of these old people that are not wheelchair bound, that are not walker bound, and it's just generally healthier. Although I will say that the that kind of American Western diet is creeping in, and as I say, I've only been here 10 years, and I've already seen it change. At some of the there's kind of like fast food sushi shops, kaiten sushi, it's conveyor belt sushi, but
Mm-hmm.
the lower end ones are starting to incorporate like hamburger sushi now, where it's these little hamburgers on top of the rice, and more of that stuff is coming in. McDonald's is very popular here, although it's a totally different experience than I had in the States. But generally, the diet is less fatty and less salty and less sweet. The sweets you get here, the donuts and stuff, are you know much less sweet. And after being here a few years, and my other foreign friends, it's hard to eat some of the sweets that come out of the States now because it's like, holy fuck, like my teeth ache, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, I still like that shit now and then. Don't get me wrong, but that's the general difference.
Well, and there's a reason fucking KFC just came out with a visual novel game. It's because they're very big in Japan, and they've got a huge culture with anime and shit because it's a Christmas tradition apparently to order a shit ton of fried chicken. So,
Yep,
I
yep.
mean that seems to me like, and of course their fried chicken is not fried like ours. It's panko fried with like more of a tempura like batter, and less of the like breadcrumbs and
Yeah.
fucking like buttermilk bullshit we get here. So like it doesn't. It's not even as unhealthy as it is here, which is really interesting to me when I looked into that. Um, before
That's
we
right. Right.
go over the food too much more though, I want to tell people to look up this Medium article because I was looking for a source on specifically like the information like I tell people. Ravi Shankara John on the startup has an article that says how exercise makes you more creative, and this echoes a lot of the stuff that I had seen from more legitimate publications than Medium. There's a cortisol flushing effect from exercise. There's stimulation of brain derived neurotropic factor, which helps in short term memory and also memory retention. There's improved focus because your body is actually thinking it's active instead of thinking that it can relax. There's a shit ton of good shit. I'm gonna put this article in the fucking description. Read it and actually apply it to your life because exercise is huge. But
Yeah.
anyway,
And
go
just
ahead.
one more thing too. If you're really like I know I get really restless, so I like to do like Zen meditations sometimes, but sometimes I'm too fucking restless. And running is great for that. You just fucking go and just go in a straight line and go far. And it kind of works a lot of shit out of your system. And
Well,
it really balances your mind if you have a hard time sitting still.
yeah,
So it's
well,
kind of like
I know it's very common here to run, but how common is it over there?
it's pretty common. I mean, it's I'd say it's similar to the States.
Cool.
A lot
Yeah, I, I,
people like
I
to
was
run.
I'm always interested in these cultural differences. And speaking of cultural differences, there's a question in chat from Jonathan Bacone about how gun rights are over there. Mind answering that?
Yeah, gun rights don't exist. That's one thing that I don't really like at all. However, you can own a gun, but it's almost pointless because the process for owning a gun requires that you store. If I'm wrong, someone correct me. But last I was updated on this, you got to store the ammo and the gun in separate locked up places, and you're going to have a routine police check.
Right.
multiple times a year. And so, there's a gun range right by my house, which is weird. So I hear people practicing there. Farmers sometimes have them for pest control or deer, what they consider pests, and population control. But it's for me to like apply to get a gun, I'd get rejected
Mm-hmm.
as a
But you can
foreigner.
open carry a katana there.
Yeah, dude. All right. Well, one of my purchases I got to make soon is a repeating crossbow for like $300, which is pretty awesome. And it's got like a crossbow magazine, but you can have all kinds of weird stuff. The balance to that, I'd say, is, and what I tell people here when they're surprised, like I tell people I've shot guns when I was kids. We had guns in the closet, and they can't believe it. But the balance is that nobody fucking has a gun. If I moved back to Chicago, I would feel wrong to not have a gun and have a family. Here, the only people that I have to worry about having a gun are the state, which is, of course, a big worry. But at the same time, nobody's armed. So it's not like if I was, back in Northwest Indiana and I'm going to be expecting home intruders with guns. But long and short, there's no gun rights. That's one thing that I think really sucks, of course, as a voluntarist. Right along with the draconian drug policy, which was ironically imposed by the U.S., which means you can get 5 years in prison just for having any amount of marijuana,
Really.
which, yeah, it's absurd.
And that's marijuana. That's not like I'm guessing it'd be probably extremely worse to get prosecuted for having something similar to like cocaine or meth or crack or any of that.
Well, I don't know because the thing is, the propaganda campaign here is so thick that they view marijuana as like on the same level as all those other drugs you just mentioned. Like one of my close Japanese friends, we were actually talking about it. I was like, have you ever tried? He's like, doesn't it make you suicidal? I was like, what? Oh, it might make you a little bit hungry, but I've seen the propaganda posters. For them, it's like, oh
Yeah,
my
there's
God,
reefer
if you have
madness over there
marijuana,
then.
you're gonna go crazy. And celebrities lose their careers, have to issue public apologies. And ironically, it wasn't like that prior to World War II, but after World War II, that was one of the U.S.'s conditions is to, you know, I don't know why. Um, but yeah, Japan has a big meth problem too, which most people don't know about. It's kind of
Ah.
underground. But yeah, gun rights, they don't really exist. But like you said, I mean, I don't know why, it's weird though. The US you can't buy like you can get shot if you have like an airsoft gun, if a cop sees you with that. But here they sell like these super super realistic looking airsoft AKs and stuff. So it's just this really weird culture, man. It's hard to encapsulate.
Yeah.
So
Well, okay, so I'm being told in the chat, and this is unverified as yet, but there's a spike in death penalties over there.
really, I didn't know that.
Okay, yeah, I
I'll
was
have to
gonna
check
see if
that
you had a
out.
reaction to that, but if you don't know anything about it, then I can't really ask.
Yeah, it could be true. I don't know. Yeah.
What? Well, if you can find a link, Matt, I'll see if I can read some of that in this episode. Um, Glenn Clark is here. He says you'd be dumb to not have a gun in corrupt Chicago. I agree with that, especially given the fact that they used to have a significant amount of restrictions on gun ownership there. Now it's I mean you still can't like concealed carry without a permit, but I think they've lifted completely the handgun ban, which is really it's amusing because like there's that thing in Virginia they're doing right now where they're trying to criminalize gun ownership, teaching people how to use guns. It's considered paramilitary terrorism under this bill they're trying to push through. Um, and so like yeah, it's pretty fucking laughable. Um, and so like the fact that I mean, I guess so you could say that Virginia is trying to do what Japan is doing. Very similar to that. They're trying to get to that level. So that's an interesting comparison. I wanted to ask you though, because I know you've posted a few times about the other people who live in Japan, and I wanted to ask you because of that. Like Roger Veer lives in Japan. Nick Sikorsky Max in Power and Boxcar Blue. I don't know who either of those people
Yep.
are, but
Yep.
those people are all people you discussed on your Steemit post about that. So I wanted to ask you how many people are in this project, and if it's just the like five of you, or if there's more.
Well, most of those people aren't really in the Voluntary Japan project. Nick Sikorsky is one of the admins on the page, although he doesn't really post there. But I consider him kind of the my Voluntary Japan bro. He's in Nagano. He's a permaculture farmer. So he's kind of struck out on his own, uh, raising veggies, and he's a hardcore anarchist voluntarist. So me and him get along quite well. But Voluntary Japan, I mean, pretty much is just me and whoever I run into, and Nick. Those other guys, some of them are here in Niigata City. Of course, Rogers spends a lot of his time in Tokyo. He's not part of Voluntary Japan, but I consider it in my mind, Voluntary Japan is just voluntarious in Japan. Corbett, James Corbett of the
Yeah,
Corbett Report is also down. He's about 8 hours away, I think, in around Okayama. So it's interesting. Japan seems to be this kind of little space that is fertile for independent thought and kind of voluntarist ideals.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
wanted
it's
to ask you if you've ever spoken in person to Corbett.
I had him on my Voluntary Japan live show once, but just over, Google Hangouts. So we did a video call a while back. That's posted to the channel, but I haven't ever met him face to face. No,
Okay,
but
because that's something you should definitely organize at some point. Like, part of the reason a lot of people stray from projects like Voluntary Japan is that they hear about it, they hear it's a location based project, but they don't see a whole bunch of people in that location, like in the same place. So, like, for instance, I've got my whole like asshole persona, and I'm fucking a shithead generally to a lot of people, and a lot of people like assume my profile picture isn't real or that I'm not using my real name. And then I got to Washington here, and I started to spread my wings a little bit because I was no longer, in a situation where I wouldn't want to reveal where I live. I'm in a relatively large city that's, fairly far spread apart. But so now I've met physically like five different people who were all interested in having like long, thorough conversations. So I've sort of been encouraging people to like branch out and see if they can engage anybody in their local areas. Like, uh, even though we've recently had a disagreement and separation, blah blah, because I had the audacity to disagree with him on one point. Um, Cal Molinay did something similar to that in Virginia, the Liberate RVA project, and I appreciated the idea of that from the moment I saw it. Like, people actually physically engaging each other is hugely valuable. The more people do that, the more real our ideas seem. So I just wanted to see if that was a thing. But okay then. Um, what like have you gotten any pushback for the voluntarist ideas you spread in Japan? Like, Japan, how are Japanese citizens reacting to your ideas?
yeah, that's a great question. It's hard to tell because people generally don't show what they're really feeling here, and most people just want to get along. So I've gotten very encouraging reactions all the way to just basically like a raised eyebrow.
Mm.
Um, and I don't know what those people really think. But the thing that has surprised me has been how many voluntarist minded people I've met, which under the surface, when you talk to them, these Japanese one on one, they're like, yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, taxation is theft. Yeah, you know, but their thing is kind of more like, but it can't be helped. There's a Japanese word, shoganai, which means it is how it is. What are you gonna do? It can't be helped. So, there hasn't been any pushback really, except for the unschooling thing that my wife and I are doing with my son. we're pretty vocal about what we do, and we found a path to unschooling here at a local free school. And we did get a little pushback when we announced that. Um, some friends, sending messages, about you got to do the public school thing and stuff like that. But generally, everyone's been really, really cool, and that's one of the things I wanted to share with people in the States and elsewhere about Japan is people pretty much just mind their own fucking business and don't want to start trouble with anyone. So, and that's part of the reason that the unschooling thing is possible here, because the culture, and I wouldn't say the culture has more sway over the state, but the culture still views parents of children as the caretakers, and it's no one's business really to intervene. So you've got, 7-year-olds that walk half a mile home from school by themselves, and that's part of the culture, and it's not viewed as weird, and no one's going to call child protective services. So like that's one thing that's really cool, and why I find it's actually, even though there's not a lot of outright pushback or outright agreement, it's easier for me to be a voluntarist here. And some people, like my wife and some of her friends, were slowly dragging into the dark side or the light side of voluntarism and stuff like that. So not a
Well,
lot of
so
pushback so far.
did you have your kids in the States and bring them over, or vice versa? Did you have them
No,
there?
my son was born here in 2012. So I came only 2 years after I got here. So yeah, he's Japanese as far as nationality is concerned.
Okay,
As
yeah, because I wanted to ask if he had a chance to be schooled in the first place. So he's basically just grown up in an unschooling environment, and like, how are his grades?
he doesn't have grades. Yeah, it's he went to the public school because the way you got to do it here is, all right, so like the American way is like, fuck you, I'm going to do what I want. And I like that. And that's how I am inside. But the way you can actually get what you want here is a lot of times smiling and just going along with things. So, how it works to get him into this local free school is we gave him 2 weeks at the public school. And he legitimately, I wanted to give him a choice too. I didn't want to force my shit on him. So I said, well, if you don't like it, we got this other option. And he didn't like it. So then we just tell the school board he's not doing well, he doesn't like it, we're going to try this other option, and pretend like it's this big, sad thing, to their face, and then we can go do what we want, and they leave you alone. So he had 2 weeks experience at a public school, but that's kind of how things are doable here in a more, I don't know, it's kind of a roundabout way, but it's easier, and you don't really make enemies,
So
if that
okay,
makes.
so two questions then. First off, um, how do you progress in society then? Because I know in the U.S. you've got a decent chunk of requirements for getting basic employment and shit like that. Like, you've got to have a high school diploma. You've got to suck the ass of the principal so that he doesn't give you bad marks to the rest of the town. You got to, go to college so that you can also suck the ass of a debt collection agency for 40 years. So
Got
how
to
is your
ask.
kid going to like fare after he's done if he stays unschooled the entire time he's a child?
Well, what he can do if he ever wants to go back to the public school, like junior high school or high school, he just has to pass an entrance exam. They have these entrance exams here for the various high schools, and then he can get the equivalent of whatever he would need to pass a college entrance exam. But basically, you can do all that stuff without going through the standard ringer that they, want to put people through. An interesting stat is they're called futoko, which means is that right? Futoko. It means school refuser. A lot of them are kids that, according to many people here, have a learning disability, but actually they just don't like school, or they're creative, or they want to do something else. But that number is at an all-time high, even though the population is dwindling. So whatever that says about public education. So there's kind of this whole, slowly growing hippie culture or independent thinking culture that's doing the unschooling thing. Yeah, but as far as, going through all that stuff and the career and all that stuff, we're not really worried about it right now, but those things definitely are issues. So yeah, but to get into a high school and then get into college or just get into college, you just take a entrance exam. The most pressure is the cultural pressure, and fitting in and the secret favors and stuff that happen here. There's a lot of unspoken cultural cues and a lot of toxic kind of ostracizing of people who don't, the nail that's still sticking out type of thing.
Hmm.
So that would be part of the dark side of the culture, which I've seen as well.
Right, there's a lot of shaming. I actually have a question in chat that was going to be my second one. I wanted to ask you if there's any bullying or racist related like bullshit that your child has to go through because they're born of a Western family.
I don't think he's been bullied. I wouldn't call it bullying yet, but kids are, and even the fucking poor Japanese kids are. Bullying here is terrible, and it's like, in my view, worse than what I witnessed in the U.S. as a kid, because it's psychological. But he's had kids that don't really want to play with him on the playground because they're timid and he looks different. But for the most part, it hasn't been an issue at all with kids because little kids are little kids and they're open to whatever. But as far as like junior high school type bullying, there's been some horror stories, man, about where even the teachers will get in on it. And I've witnessed it having worked in the public schools here earlier on. And you're really alone here. And if everyone decides that they don't like you, it's not like you're just going to get a punch to the stomach and then become friends. It's like people are going to stop talking to you. Teachers might not intervene because they don't want to rock the boat. One kid committed suicide where I forgot where it was, and the students had a mock funeral. They made some mock funeral. I think it was before the suicide. They put like a mock funeral thing on his desk, and the teacher didn't do anything. And I believe the teacher was even laughing about it. So that type of shit, which is like pretty common here, is dark, dark, dark. And Japan has one of the highest suicide rates per capita in the world too, if that hasn't changed. So there's this really dark side of things, which is this workaholic, social ostracization, don't be different, don't stand out type thing that also exists, but it's not everything. So,
Well, hey, so just so that I get called an SJW, because like
yep,
it has to happen at least once a day.
cool.
Let me meet my quota by asking you if part of the reason for that workaholic culture is that so much of the Western tech is based on Asian factory workers.
I have no idea about that. I don't
Okay.
know. I know in Japan though, like unpaid overtime is normal. And people will just act like, well, shoganai, that word, it can't be helped. That's how it is. I gotta work.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were Japanese, I would say I probably wouldn't live here, or I would do some other kind of job because I'm not expected to fit in. I never will be Japanese, and that's acknowledged. And so I don't have to adhere to all those rules. But I don't know about the tech thing. That could have something to do with it. But yeah, it's the workaholism is real. It's very, very real. And I've had conflict with past companies because I wouldn't do it. But if you're Japanese, it's especially hard because not only can you lose that job, you can lose friends, you can lose future opportunities because it's like this kind of whisper campaign about, who fits in and who doesn't. So, but again, that's the black side of things. Not everything is like that, but
Well, I mean, you're also on the channel of a cynical, pessimistic asshole, so I mean, it's fine to focus on the black side of things for just a moment.
cool.
Um, so, okay, in that particular vein, then, let's go over your job. What do you do?
Right now I do various things. I teach English. I also write articles for Bitcoin.com. Um, and that's it. I'm mostly doing freelance writing. these days. So I was a
Okay.
teacher. I was a full-time English teacher for about 8.5 years, and just recently started writing for Bitcoin.com, which is fucking awesome. I love doing that, and I teach part-time still. So
Okay. So
yeah,
let me ask you first off, um, are you living at or like below Japan's poverty line?
I don't know if I am anymore. I think I was pretty close to it for a while. Like a lot of people are pretty close to it, um, which is sounds weird for Americans, but like it's you can live kind of well at the poverty line here. So I don't know. I don't know anymore. What is the poverty line now?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll check that while I ask you the next question.
I don't know if
Uh,
I was actually there, but one of my teacher friends told me he's like at one point he's like, like we're close to the poverty line, right? I was like, what? I
yeah,
don't
because
know.
what I wanted to ask you is if your teaching English is enough for a career, or if you have to supplement it with Bitcoin articles.
Well, writing right now is pretty much what I'm doing full time, which is something I've been working for a long time. I'm teaching very little English right now. But before, uh, if you're single and you work at an English language school, you can get by. But if you're a family, and playing into this workaholic thing, and especially if you're an unschooling family and you're not dumping your kid off at daycare all the time, you're pretty much poor. Like, that's true. That's true. But I've been working towards getting away from teaching, which I'm fucking pumped that I finally did. But who knows, it's a constant roller coaster of just trying to have multiple streams of income and doing that. But right now, my main thing is writing articles, which is really awesome. But
Yeah.
for
Okay.
8.5 years, yeah, it's a struggle. We were doing like one income, right? Because I didn't want to just people drop their kids off at the daycare from 6 months, and I didn't want to do that. And so my wife, in lieu of working, stayed home with him, and she kind of, sacrificed her time for that. Whereas a lot of people here, it's like, okay, the kid is 3 months or 6 months or whatever. We take him to the childcare. Mom works, dad works, and we go into a bunch of credit card debt or whatever debt, loan debt, and we live the lifestyle of the Joneses or the Tanakas, and that's it. But that wasn't the fucking thing I wanted to do. I didn't want to get trapped into that. And
Right.
my wife, God bless her, is a rebel, kind of unusually a rebel, and a voluntarist as well. So she was cool with it. So, but yeah, the poverty line is there's a lot of English teachers that living at the poverty line, which is funny because you're not starving, but it's like it's not fucking fun. It's a lot of pressure. But Americans too. I mean, it's a paycheck to paycheck, hand to mouth type thing. That's the design because God forbid people start getting wealth via cryptocurrencies or anything else, and it's not controlled wealth. Well, they might actually start to be able to build a better world for themselves, and we can't have that because we need them to prop up the parasite class. So it's
Gotcha.
that thing, yeah.
Well, so what I'm seeing is that it's kind of um, hard to analyze poverty in Japan because they only released their official poverty rate in 2011 and poverty line, and they claimed that 15.7 of the population percent of the population fell below the poverty line in 2006, um, rising from 14.9 in '03, and what I'm not exactly sure if this is accurate because this site, um, its links are old and its information is from 2011. But what they claim is that the poverty line is what it looks like is 1,679 Japanese yen. So do you make above that?
1600, 16 what?
S
1679?
Yeah, for
Hold on.
food, I guess.
A year?
I think that might be per month. I'm not exactly sure though. This
Oh,
site, I'll put the
month.
link in the description.
Yeah, so that would be. I think there's newer information I've seen, but even so, that would be like what, about 1,600 bucks a month or something? I'm not.
Probably.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think I might have been below poverty line for like a month, but most people aren't below the poverty line. But it's not far away for English teachers. And actually, what led me to this new gig writing more was one of my old jobs was trying to run a scam that's quite common here, and they do it to Japanese and especially to foreigners where they can pay you as a part-time employee. And then they do a little contract magic with some slippery words and try to classify you as a full-time employee so they won't pay your benefits. And they also demand that you have to be in the office even when you have no work to do.
Mm.
And I got wise to that and ended up busting out of there and denouncing it as a scam. And that kind of opened the door for new shit. But there's all kinds of stuff like that. The country is just saddled with debt. It's palpable. You can feel it in the air. Another interesting thing I noticed is that because the taxes are so high here with the socialized healthcare and stuff, there's hardly any cops on the road
Mm.
like patrolling. There's hardly any speeding tickets, which you could say is a good thing, but it's like you're still getting, you're paying for it elsewhere, but kind of a
Well,
weird.
okay, so
They're
we've got
revenue,
questions in chat. How far does $1,000 go in Japan?
Depends on what you're buying. I mean, I don't know what to compare, what to make that relative to. $1,000 would be over 100,000 Japanese yen. Just a second. Yeah.
And I think he
I
means
don't,
like a month.
a month? Oh, I mean, you might be able to pay your rent and a few bills with 1,000.
Gotcha.
It
Yeah.
depends on where you're living. If you're living in Tokyo, it won't go far at all. If you're living like where I'm living, you could pay rent for maybe 500 bucks if you get a nice place, a little place in the country.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
so all right, let's talk about because we've been talking about that for a bit, and now you got to go in like 20 minutes. Um, what first off, what led you to start writing for Bitcoin.com, and second off, um, like what's your general expertise there?
Well, since I since around 2015 or 2016, I've I started messaging Roger Ver about Bitcoin and various things on Twitter and said hi, and he was really cool, man. I couldn't believe it. He messaged me back, and I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. This guy's, kind of big time, taking the time to talk to just a voluntarious blogger. And that's when I got into Bitcoin and stuff like that, and started the Voluntary Japan thing. And just over the years, when Steemit came about, I said I'd like to interview you. He said, "Why don't you come on down to the office in Tokyo?" I was like, "No shit." So I went down to Tokyo, interviewed him, and it's just been that kind of back and forth kind of communications now and then. And as I said, this last job sucked, and I've been, just I kept bugging the people at Bitcoin.com, saying, "Hey, I can write," or "Hey, I can do this," or "Hey, can I learn to code?" Probably not, not soon enough to be of any use to you guys. But I've always been a writer, so I just was persistent. And finally, when that last shitty job broke, I was wide open and free. So I said, "Hey, what can I do?" And finally, the door just kind of opened. So I started writing there. They checked out some of my work, helped me improve in a few ways. What I mostly focus on there is uh, libertarian angles. I write about everything cryptocurrency related, but my specialty, I guess, would be individual self-ownership as it relates to crypto in a nutshell. And yeah, so I think I've done about 140 some articles so far. Since
Okay, so
June.
in that
So
score, first off, what crypto do you think is the best for personal liberty?
I don't know all the cryptos. Of course, I'm biased, so my personal favorite is Bitcoin Cash right now. And I like the privacy coins. I like Monero, so I guess Monero and Bitcoin Cash are probably my favorites. I haven't really back in the beautiful time that was the when was that? December 2017 when shit all skyrocketed and I was temporarily a rich man. That was awesome. I had lots of different coins at that point, but I don't really hold too many anymore. Those are probably I have little BTC, some BCH, and I think Monero maybe. So
Gotcha.
those are
Okay, because
my favorites. So I know there's tons of controversy now about what is the best and what's the worst, and this is a scam or that's a scam. But I don't know. I when I got into crypto, it was before this whole Bitcoin core maximalism thing, and everyone was just trying to kind of be buddies and see what projects worked and what projects didn't. So that's
okay,
those are the
well,
ones I like.
so
I like cryptos that can help people be more free and that people are going to use in a permissionless manner, because that's the power of crypto. And what's happening now is so many people are, oh, we got to wait for institutional money. Oh, we got to regulate it and mainstream it. And that just basically neuters it. It takes away all its power and utility. So that's the angle I'm always trying to push, which Bitcoin.com is very, I guess you could say, voluntarist libertarian in that sense, because their overarching goal is to bring economic freedom to more people. That's the
hmm.
stated.
Okay, so because first off, um, for anybody who like wants to find him, one of the places you can find him is Float, and their first cryptocurrency that they integrated was Bitcoin, and they say the next one will be Ethereum, and the next one after that will be Bitcoin Cash. So
Oh, nice.
clearly, the guys who run that place, well, guy and girl, I think it's just Kingsley and Aaron. Um, who run that place are maximalists, and they have their eyes set on
Agree.
primarily Bitcoin. So I wanted to ask what specifically about Bitcoin Cash makes it better in your eyes than Bitcoin.
Well, for payments now, the Bitcoin white paper, says at the outset it's a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, but BTC is no longer a cash system. It's become more like a digital gold. But from what I've seen, because when I first got in, it was all BTC, and I remember people in Tokyo spending it, ATMs, using it, having fun with it, and actually it's growing as this kind of economy, and it was disruptive. Whereas now it seems like people mostly just want to get the moon Lambo, and that's great too, but they don't really want to spend it. And the toxic maximalism that has come about is like it mocks people who want to spend crypto anymore, which just blows my mind because Nakamoto himself, described it as a cash system and talked about, spending it. So with transaction fees and which aren't too terribly high, but if you make many transactions, they are. Bitcoin Cash fees are much lower. The community is all about using it and using it freely and in a permissionless manner, in an economically sovereign manner for the individual. And I've just I have nothing against BTC really. I like it. I have some of it. But anytime I try to converse with some of these people, it's just like outright uninformed mockery. And I know people have criticisms of BCH and whatever, and people should be able to say their criticisms, but I just don't see it as having much utility anymore, other than waiting on it to go up in value. But the store of value narrative is kind of economically misguided, in my opinion, too, because in order for something to be a store of value long term, it has to have some kind of use case feeding into that store of value thing, which gold had at first. Gold has had for what, I don't know, thousands of years. So now gold just kind of has its value established, but BTC hasn't been around that long, and store of value is great, but it just seems like it's more like something you hold and wait on. Where I'm interested in the kind of revolutionary aspect of crypto, and I think
Well,
BTC and Monero are great for that.
so let me ask you
BCH, I mean.
two things. First off, because you want to talk about revolution, um, Bitcoin was recently seized by the Hong Kong police. That was designed to go for protesters, and like I wanted to ask if Bitcoin Cash is more secure in your eyes and better for revolutionaries, or if like the problems are relatively equal in that regard. And I also wanted to ask you after you answer that, um, what your view is on currencies like Stellar, where the transaction is completed in like 3 seconds. I was very impressed when I sent my first Stellar. I sent it to a wallet I controlled, and it sent like fucking that, and it was just there. And to me, like if I'm thinking Bitcoin Cash, which still takes a while to transfer, even though it's quote cash. I think if I'm gonna go
It
with a
really
coin
depends on where you're
specifically
sending it.
for speedy transfer, Stellar makes more sense to me.
Okay, so the first part was about the revolution. Yeah, I mean more like a individualist type revolution with people just dropping out and doing what they want, um, refusing to pay for unjust wars, refusing to pay for anything they don't want via taxes. Um, I think that, of course, blockchain and Bitcoin is not anonymous. Um,
Well, it can be. It can be anonymized by things
yeah,
like
but
coin joining and Wasabi.
right. And BCH has some awesome new applications that are even built right into some wallets. Like Cash Shuffle is one of them, and similar. And Cash Fusion, which should be coming soon, which should be even more private. So as far as the transaction times, Bitcoin Cash is pretty damn fast in my experience. I haven't really had too many problems. It might depend who you're sending it to, but I don't have experience with Stellar. So, but
Well,
yeah,
I'll send you a link about Stellar. I think you would enjoy it for the same purposes as Bitcoin, especially since one of the things involved with Stellar is that they try to like promote it as an internationalist currency. They talk about like remittances pretty regularly, and they talk about like the idea of using this to send and receive cash to people overseas. And if you're trying to look for like a way to send money easily and quickly, to me Stellar is ace, and it's like I have never seen something as fast as Stellar. But I'm definitely open to criticism on that score. So I'll send you a link to find out more about that specific thing. But um,
cool,
so
man. I haven't used it. Is that like you mean like 3 seconds? It's all confirmed, or just like it's acknowledged as payment sent?
so how it works is there's tokens that represent Stellar on the actual blockchain, and those tokens send very quickly before the transaction confirms. And the
Oh,
reason they do that is so that the transaction confirmation process is done on trusted computers, and that trusted network means that like essentially there's sort of a security circle built into it. And that means that the transaction will very likely confirm, and if it doesn't, then it's fine, the tokens burn. They haven't had too many issues with needing to do that. Mostly the transactions just confirm as normal, and once the transaction confirms, it registers that on the blockchain. But the token sends like very quickly. That's the thing that sends quickly.
yeah. Most of my Bitcoin Cash transactions send in seconds, so I don't know. I'll try that though. Send it to me.
Gotcha.
I'm uh, I'm not too much of a speculator these days, but I'm always interested to learn more.
Well, actually, fuck it. While I have this open, I'll post a link in chat to the Coinbase earn thing, because Coinbase has this thing where you can earn a certain amount of cryptocurrency because you learned about it and because you answered certain questions correctly after you watched some videos. You can earn, like, I think it's $10 worth of XLM, which is the Stellar token. I'll post
Is
that in
that
chat,
stored
and then I'll
like
send it out to you.
is that stored on a non-custodial wallet then or something? I'm not a big fan of Coinbase's IRS divulging activities.
Well, and you're
But
free. You're free to not join through Coinbase. You're free to just buy it on a different platform if you want to. This is just a way for people who are interested in learning to do that, because the place that you earn it initially would be deposited to a Coinbase sourced wallet. But then you could transfer it to a wallet of your own if you wanted. I think Coinomi supports it. I know several other places do. Keybase supports it, which I definitely love Keybase for a lot of programming and security aspects. And the fact that it's a verification system, so you know who you're dealing with, definitely. So if you don't want to store it on Coinbase, you can store it on Keybase. You can get a Keybase account, and it comes with an XLM wallet. Although, like, if you do that, I would recommend getting verified in a few ways before you do it, so that they don't consider you a bot. They recently did some airdrops where there's some issues with spam accounts being started for that, so they actually had to shut down the airdrop because of that. So verify yourself in a few ways. This is mostly just for other people. I mean, I'm sure you can handle it on your own. But either way, I wanted to ask that. Also, there's a question in chat. Let me see if I can find it. Um, if you were to move any place on the planet, where would it be? Have you considered moving to another place ever?
Yeah. I don't really want to, but if I had to, uh, I was considering maybe South America, like in Paraguay or Chile. I've considered both those places.
And why?
Uh, well, there's a really cool dude named Gabriel Shear who's down in Chile. He's got a community called Fort Galt. Not to be confused with Galt's Gulch, the failed scam-ridden project of years earlier. But he's building an intentional, basically voluntarist community there. It's already it's under construction. It's built. There's people there, but it's still growing and they're still building. So that would be one reason I would consider South America. The other one was, and Finian can tell you about this. I think it's Paraguay. But there's a lot of points about Paraguay that are pretty cool as far as gun rights, low taxes, and stuff like that. So those are the places I've thought of. In a purely fantasy sense, not regarding governments or whatever, I've always wanted to go to Iceland, but it's just another socialist hell. So yeah, those
Gotcha.
three. I guess. Just because Iceland has supposedly some of the biggest, nicest libraries in the world and just seems cool.
Okay. So let me ask you then, because I know you got to go relatively soon. It's been, I think, a little over an hour at this point. But I wanted to ask you, if there was, like, a way you could convince people, like you just had a moment to talk to every single American all at once, what would you do to try and get them to move to Japan?
Oh man, I don't know. A lot of them might hate it, but a lot of people might like it. Wow. I guess I'd just say it's fucking beautiful. The nature is it's beautiful. It's just the country's almost all mountains and sea. Um, that would be my probably number one reason that I think would make the most amount of people in the States want to come over. hot springs. I spent Christmas at the hot springs and natural hot springs and cold beer. So yeah,
All
very,
right.
very icy cold beer. I think that's
And,
probably the best selling point
and one
as far as
other
casting a broad
thing,
net. Yeah.
if you have the ability to say one thing to try and convert people to anarchy, what would it be?
Um, I would just say, man, that's a tough fucking question. Uh, what would I say? I would just say that you already know stealing is wrong, and murder is wrong, and rape is wrong, and coercion is wrong. You're just too afraid to follow that to its logical conclusion. Something like that, I guess, because
Yeah, that
that's
makes sense to me. All right, well, what else do you want to tell my audience, and where can they find you?
You mentioned Float. I really like Float so far. I'm on Float. I'm on Twitter at Voluntary Japan, on Facebook at Voluntary Japan. Um, I have a writer account, Graham Smith, for my articles on Bitcoin.com, and YouTube, Voluntary Japan. Although YouTube is currently purging a bunch of crypto channels, I'm not a crypto channel, but I'm looking for some way to escape YouTube. But I'm still there for now.
Okay, well, first off, what I can say in that particular regard is, first off, I've heard about this purge, and it's definitely bullshit. A lot of these channels have been purged for duplicate content when there's no duplicate content, or spreading misinformation when they've not been proven to have spread any misinformation. It's another social media attack on alternate viewpoints. So
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
definitely opposed to this purge, but if anybody wants to catch a different place where they can like sort of get expanded to a better audience, I would advise people join BitChute, because BitChute has all of the basic features of YouTube except live streaming, and it doesn't, as far as I'm aware, have ads, and what it does have is free speech. Like it's the play. I don't know if you know them, but these
Yeah, I
people are
actually
people
just
I
wrote an
respect
article on.
extremely. TruthStream Media is over there, and they're over there because they can't get traction on YouTube anymore. YouTube is physically blocking them. So I would
Yeah,
definitely recommend people go over there and also subscribe to TruthStream because they're good people.
yeah. I just wrote an article listing BitChute was included some alternatives to YouTube. I also listed Float and some others. Um, yeah, it's really interesting what's happening. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
One got, like 2 years of videos removed. It's like 2 years of your life, man.
Yeah, and a
But
lot of these
it's
people
pretty
don't have
cool.
backups because they think YouTube is going to be a stable
Yeah.
place to be. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
It's a big shame. All right, so there are links in the description where you can find all of what he does. Is there anything you want to say to my audience before you log off here?
Yeah, if you're considering coming to Japan, come check it out. I think you'll love it, and I'm always eager to share Japan with more people. So, and I'm eager to share America with people here too. So it's kind of a nice juxtaposition to be a foreigner in Japan. So if anyone's considering traveling here, I think you'll have a fucking blast.
Yeah, and of course, practice some home security so you don't get robbed like PewDiePie did.
PewDiePie got robbed?
Oh yeah, okay.
I didn't know that.
This is something to just look into at some other point. But he bought a second house, and his second house was in Japan because he likes the culture a lot. And he left very temporarily, and as soon as he left, his entire house was ripped
What?
off.
What? Did they catch the person?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Oh my God, that's really, really rare.
So
But I guess
practice home
I broke.
security because you don't want to be a target,
That's true. Lock
and
your
you can't
doors.
shoot people.
Can't you can only crossbow them.
Anyway, all that being said, feel free to support me using the links in the description. All that stuff. I got videos coming out on Revolution. I got the next episode of Pedos in Power. And because I got Hit Film Pro, all this stuff is going to start increasing in quality. So feel free to subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video, blah, blah. Check out all of Graham Smith's stuff in the description. And with all that being said, find your freedom and smash the state.
Thanks, Jeremy.